this show was one of the last animated greats. At a time when it was the beginning of the end for my childhood, and I didn't know it yet, this animated series came out and wowed me with its stories and characters. I hadn't forgotten about Avatar: The Last Airbender. I mean, how could I? And seeing as it's been nearly a decade since I've seen it in its entirety, I thought, why not watch it all over again? Before I get this review underway, I just want to say that since there's so much to talk about, I'll be reviewing the series by each book. That way I can take my time and you get more in-depth reviews. Starting with the first two episodes, Boy and the Iceberg and The Avatar Returns, these two episodes really set up quite a bit, and I remember being hooked from the start. With these episodes taking their time to introduce the Avatar universe, story, characters, tone, and overall world. And if you've seen this show as many times as I have, then you'll know the opening narration like an old friend. 100 years ago, the four nations lived in harmony and everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop them, but when the world needed him most, he vanished. So because there is no Avatar and the cycle can't continue until the current one passes away, the world is left divided because of one nation's actions. That is until one day when our main characters Katara and Sokka find Avatar Aang. The initial setup is good and leads us to other characters and locations, but for now let's focus on the main cast. Aang is 112 years old, technically speaking, and is found with his animal companion Appa. Not knowing how much time has passed and how chaotic it's gotten since his disappearance doesn't really settle in for him until the third episode. And because of the actions of the Fire Nation and not being there to be mediator, Aang feels deep guilt. He's a carefree pacifist monk. He's easy to befriend. He is wise and yet goofy. He's a nice guy with wit, but when pushed, he will fight. He's just a kid that never wanted the pressures of being the Avatar. And only knowing one element and having no clue of how to access the Avatar state leaves a long road ahead of him. Katara is a self-taught waterbender and the only one of her tribe who has a clue of how to bend an element. She's not anywhere close to being a master, but she's learned a few moves on her own, they're just not perfected. She's someone that doesn't back down and she's got a short temper at times. She also helps those that need comfort. Sokka is a non-believer in bending elements and really anything that he hasn't seen. I can't blame him, he's lived in that one tribe his whole life and hasn't experienced the world, and slowly starts to believe and changing his views on the world. Starting with when Appa first takes flight.
He's flying! He's flying! Katara, big deal, he's flying.
He gains a sense of humor as the season goes along, and retracts his sexist views of girls. He gets humbled a lot throughout this first season, which leads to character growth, but I'm not saying Sokka doesn't have his moments. Sokka learned how to fight Earth Kingdom style from the Kyoshi warriors. He's usually the guy with a plan. He comes up with numerous solutions for problems. If Sokka was born in our time, he'd probably be a do-it-yourself kind of guy or a scientist. The main antagonists come in form of a teenage male who needs to capture the Avatar. For what reason? I won't reveal that. But Prince Zuko isn't that bad of a guy. He may be hot-tempered and his methods of getting results are antagonistic at times, but he never crossed the line. He never did anything so unspeakably evil that I saw him as the bad guy. Even as a kid, I never felt like he was evil, just desperate. And he's shown that a few times, putting himself at risk to capture Aang. He has a few moments where he learns his lesson and moments where he shows that he has a heart. The one guiding him to learn these lessons is Uncle Iroh, who gives Zuko wise proverbs. And if you never noticed this, he never fights when Zuko is fighting Team Avatar. He just stands to the side and watches. There's a reason for this, and it's pretty good foreshadowing for later on. He is a really laid-back, soft-spoken, easygoing guy, and the opposite of Zuko, who's usually ill-tempered and impatient. I love their dynamic because, well, they offset each other, and while one is trying to teach the other valuable knowledge that someone of Uncle's age would know, Zuko just has tunnel vision. Zuko may ignore Uncle Iroh's advice, but that doesn't stop Iroh from trying. Uncle Iroh also loves tea.
Why don't you enjoy a cup of calming jasmine tea?
I don't need any calming tea! I need to capture the Avatar!
The antagonist of both parties is Admiral Zhao, who antagonizes Zuko and is also after Aang. He's outright villainous and doesn't have a single redeeming trait. He's not pure evil or anything, but he's not someone I could see changing. Zhao is what I thought Zuko was going to be like when the show first premiered. He's also petty and goes to far extreme lengths to capture Aang. The writing is pretty good for the most part, and while there was some comedic bits I would have cut out, I feel like the season was more tame than the future seasons. There's a lot of great world building and character development throughout this season, my favorite being Sokka's. The writers took their time telling the story while at the same time giving us new information about the overall universe. The casting is some of the best voice casting I've ever seen. And it's not lazy voice casting either. A lot of these voice actors I've never heard in other animated shows except Mae Whitman, Dante Basco, and Mako? I think that's how you pronounce his name. If not, I am terribly sorry, I apologize. But even then, these guys have unique voices and aren't voices you've heard in 1,000 other animated shows, which to me is tiresome. You may get a familiar VA as a guest appearance, but that's not at all distracting. That's what I love about animated shows of my time. You hear different voices and not the same 5 or 6 VAs. Out of all the VAs, I'd have to say the best ones are Dante Basco and Mako. I just love their line deliveries. Seeing as the creators of the series loved anime so much that it inspired them to make this show, it's only fitting that it has an anime-esque art style, and it's a pretty solid one. The animation is a little sluggish in the first few episodes, but with what budget they had to start with, it's passable. It seems as the episodes were being released, they got a bigger budget as time passed. Probably because Nick saw what a huge hit this show became, so they gave the Avatar crew more funding. Compare the first episode's action to an action scene from mid-season 1, and you'll see the difference. And it only got better from there. The soundtrack is also unique and very much inspired from Eastern cultures. Speaking of which, that's what also inspired the clothing of each nation's clothing style, along with the overall look of the show. There's a lot to like about this show. And to me, while it was a show that would be remembered by the children of that generation, I really feel like the stepping off point for the series, where it went from being a good show to a show that would be immortalized and become one of the greats of that decade, is when the Winter Solstice 2-parter came out. It was already good, but when those 2 episodes came out, I feel like it kicked the show's story up a notch and became more than just something for kids. If you're wondering what my favorite episode of Book 1 is, it can be summed up with these images and music. And now, while I've been praising this series so far, that doesn't mean I don't have problems. On occasion early on in the series, the animation isn't perfect and the character models look off, and from here I'm going to dip a little into spoilers because it just has to be talked about. So if you don't want to be spoiled, why don't you turn off this review and watch the show? It's on Netflix. You don't need me to tell you it's good. Or you can click to the time on screen. Your choice. Okay, so first off, this was the book that had the Great Divide episode, which I gave a fair shot on rewatch, but yeah, it's still a weak episode and doesn't affect the overall story or give any of the characters any development. If anything, they act out of character in the episode, especially Aang at the end. I also found the conflict in the Bato episode to be weak, too, despite being an overall entertaining episode, but no one ever brings that up. The one conflict that makes 0 sense is the one we see in the Waterbending Master. It's really, really dumb, and I'm shocked that for as many fans that bash the Great Divide don't get on Waterbending Master's case. Okay, so the gang finally gets to the Northern Water Tribe, and Aang gets a waterbending teacher named Master Paku, and what's the problem, you ask? He won't teach Katara because she has a vagina. He won't teach Katara because she's a girl, which out of all the conflicts you could have thought of, this was it? Really? This doesn't work for a number of reasons. 1. Why did it have to be about her gender? Up to this point, I like these characters because they're interesting characters. They feel real. They've gone through their shares of trials and tribulations. And then you break down this conflict to sexism. Did you have to blatantly remind me that Katara is a girl? This couldn't have been about Katara continuing to struggle learning waterbending, because she struggled a lot in the waterbending school episode. But no, let's break it down to because she's a girl. 2. This is a fictional universe. You didn't have to bring such a touchy subject to this animated series. Granted, something similar happened in the Warriors of Kyoshi, but that was to teach Sokka a lesson and to humble him. Being a sexist, cocky know-it-all resulted in him being humiliated, and even then it was very brief because Suki's an easy-going girl. I like Suki. I sure hope she returns.
Aren't you gonna fight?
Go back to the healing huts with the other women where you belong.
The conflict ends with Katara being beaten and, oh, Paku has changed his heart because he found Gran-Gran's necklace. They were supposed to get married and he's no longer sexist all of a sudden. If she didn't have that necklace, then he stays sexist. If Katara wasn't related to Gran-Gran, he stays sexist. 3. This feels on the lowdown like a forced girl power statement. I don't want to say it is, but with lines like these...
I'll be outside if you're man enough to fight me. You can't knock me down!
It's kind of hard to not think that. 4. This is my last point on the subject, but if this is forbidden, then you're telling me that female avatars of the past have been denied to learn waterbending because of their gender? I know that they could have gone to the South Pole to learn, but when you really think about it, it's still really dumb. Imagine if Avatar Kyoshi traveled all the way to the Northern Water Tribe, and then they deny the Avatar of all people that she can't learn waterbending because she's a girl. The Avatar! She needs to master all 4 elements. It's vital that she learns, but they won't because of her gender. See how universe breaking that is? It just doesn't make sense in this universe for that reason alone. On top of the fact that other nations have boys and girls bending elements, it's just stupid. It's not a horrible episode, and it's not an episode that ruins a series or anything. I'm just surprised no one pointed that out. And Sokka and Yue's romance was underdeveloped when she became the Moon Spirit. I felt nothing as a kid, and I feel nothing now. Looking back, I think that the Great Divide should have been scrapped in favor of having 4 episodes in the Northern Water Tribe. That way they get more development and stories. There's probably a lot that they didn't get to explore. An episode in the format of Tales of Ba Sing Se would have helped a lot, but with the Northern Water Tribe, just something to think about. And just one thing, it's not a flaw, just a question. While I watched the show as a kid, I always thought to myself, is the Avatar the only one able to master all 4 elements, or can anyone do it? If anyone has the answer to that, I'd like to know, and why. Despite all those flaws, I still enjoyed Book 1. I will give it a recommendation. What a good start for the series, and I can't wait to delve into Book 2 in the next few months. I'm Lino Mars of the MCA Productions crew, and I'll see you next time.
I have a task for you.
Ah!